Working in confined spaces and the laws. Topics to be covered in this module. Why do you need training? What are confined spaces? Confined space legislation in England and Wales. Other legislation and guidance. Ireland legislation. Roles and responsibilities of the employers and others. Commanding officers, COs, or heads of establishment, HOEs. Managers. All personnel. Why do you need training? According to the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, IOSH, around 15 people are killed in confined space incidents every year in the UK. This makes up a significant percentage of fatalities in the workplace, and in many cases, they could have been avoided by sensible precautions and adequate training. A number of industries still require regular maintenance to be performed in awkwardly placed areas. This can't be easily avoided and is a necessary procedure in workplaces such as factories, water supply facilities, docks, farms, any premise that has storage tanks, or property with underground access pipes and tunnels. Not only is there a risk to workers in a confined space, but there is also a significant amount of danger to those employees or personnel who attempt to rescue anyone trapped or hurt there. Therefore, it is essential that everyone who works in an environment like this knows how to react in an emergency, and how to protect themselves and others. What are confined spaces? A confined space is generally categorized as being an area which is at least partially enclosed, and has available access for a human body but is not specifically designed to contain one. This is further qualified if there is a risk to human life, due to the environment or hazardous material within. The most recognized types of confined spaces are sewer or water tunnels, manholes, wells, agricultural silos, storage areas or ship holds, culverts, small unventilated rooms, compression chambers in factories and furnaces. But any area where an average-sized adult cannot stand or extend limbs can be considered to be a dangerously confined space where time periods of work should be limited. Confined space legislation in England and Wales. Employees are covered by various laws and regulations that will protect their well-being when working in confined spaces. The basic outline is covered by the Health and Safety at Work etc. Act 1974. This ensures that employers are held responsible for the safety of their workers and the general public. Whilst this generally covers inherent risks involved in confined spaces, it is also reinforced specifically by the Confined Spaces Regulations 1997. These apply where a risk assessment has judged that there is a chance of injury from working in a confined area. The regulations include recommendations that entry into a confined space is to be avoided if possible. If entry into the confined space is required, a safe system of work is officially in place. Emergency arrangements are documented and prepared before work starts in a confined space. The Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1999 also requires that employers and self-employed workers carry out a risk assessment and hazard control, and will cover confined space work additionally. Other legislation and guidance. A number of other rules and legislation also provide guidelines for considerations and when operating in confined spaces. These include the Workplace, Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations 1992, the Dangerous Substances and Explosive Atmospheres Regulations 2002, the Merchant Shipping, Entry into Dangerous Spaces Regulations 1988. HSE Guidelines, Confined Spaces Resources, and INDG 273, Working with Solvents. An employer or worker may also want to take the following regulations into account: the Personal Protective Equipment at Work Regulations 2002, Respiratory Protective Equipment at Work Guidance HSG 53, the Control of Substances Hazardous to Health Regulations 2002, the Provision and Use of Work Equipment Regulations 1998. Electricity at Work Regulations 1989. Workplace, Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations 1992. Control of Noise at Work Regulations 2005. Control of Lead at Work Regulations 2002. Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012. Work at Height Regulations 2005. Ireland legislation. For work taking place specifically in Ireland, the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work, Confined Spaces, Regulations 2001 cover all work that takes place in confined spaces. Similar to the UK and Welsh regulations, it ensures that every employer or self-employed worker has to observe person-adequate safety routines when performing work in a confined space. These include the prohibition of entry into a confined space if it is not deemed necessary. Risk assessment and evaluation exercises being carried out prior to work commencing. Safety procedures and hazard mitigation being in place prior to work. The worker involved having completed the required training sessions. An emergency procedure and rescue plan to be documented before the work commences. Roles and responsibilities of the employers and others. As detailed in the Confined Spaces Regulations 1997, there are strict observations regarding the responsibilities of employers and self-employed individuals. These clearly state that every employer will ensure that his employees will come to no harm as a result of work carried out as per his instructions. Every self-employed person shall comply with all practical regulations as regards their own work, but also that any other work lies within the existing safety protocols for the premises. This translates to the following actions that must be taken by those in managerial positions. Commanding officers, COs, or heads of establishment, HOEs. Within a government or army environment, or point of operations, the CO and/or HOE should make sure that all confined spaces are correctly identified, documented, assessed, and with access to it strictly controlled. The situation and condition of the space should be reviewed and audited regularly. Managers. Managers of workers and owners of property should strictly control the amount of work that is carried out in confined spaces, which fall under their responsibility. Not only should the risk be assessed and audited, but procedures should also be in place to organize appropriate permits to work before any tasks commence. Also, they have a responsibility to make sure all employees are aware of the results of any risk assessments pertaining to the confined space, and any particular danger to themselves if they enter. Emergency or evacuation procedures are published and forwarded to all workers. Restriction methods, preventing unnecessary access to the confined space, are fully in place and regularly reviewed. All other personnel. All personnel and employees that have contact with confined spaces must cooperate with their managers and superiors to ensure safety protocols are observed at all times. They also hold the responsibility for informing their manager if there are significant changes with the status of the confined space. Alerting their manager if someone accesses the area without a permit. Telling their manager if the safety protocols are believed to be ineffective or insufficient. Summary. In this module, we have covered the following points. A significant number of fatalities occur in the UK due to accidents in confined spaces. A confined space is an area which is at least partially enclosed. There are many examples of confined spaces that commonly exist in the workplace. The UK has many regulations and rules that protect employees from harm in confined spaces. Employees, employers, and the self-employed all have a part in ensuring confined places remain accident-free.